Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your tangled yogi out here in Northern California. Welcome to the Inktobertangles 2025 challenge. We are doing the Itty Bitty Kitty series this year, and we are on volume 4. Let's talk about the things that we're going to need for class today. I'm going to be working with the Micron PN Pen. I have a white gel pen from Jelly Roll. It is a Jelly Roll 10. I will be working with the Identi Pen for pooling our ink inside of the cats. I also have a graphite pencil and a blending stump. If you don't have a blending stump, just grab a Q-tip out of the bathroom and you'll be just fine. You know me, I am a Prismacolor girl. Grab your Prismacolor pencils. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. And if you don't have Prismacolor pencils, just grab whatever color pencils you have and play along. Because this is the Itty Bitty Kitty series, we are working on tiles that are just a little bit smaller. My tiles are 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. If you don't have a tile that size, just go ahead and make a square inside your favorite sketchbook or on your favorite cardstock that's 3.5 by 3.5 inches, and you'll be just fine. With that said, let's get started with the Romeow and Juliett edition. Many of you know that I like to do a little centering exercise before we get started with creating, so let's go ahead and take a comfortable seated position. Allow your hands to rest into your lap. Let your spine grow comfortably tall, letting your shoulders melt away from your ears. And if you feel comfortable with it, you can allow your eyes to close for a moment. Letting your attention come to your breath here. As you breathe in through the nose gently and softly exhaling through the mouth. Inhaling through the nose, feeling the body expand with breath. And as you exhale, feeling the release. And taking one more deep breath in right here. And letting it go with a sigh. And just staying with your breath for the next few moments. I'd like to share another quote today, and this one is by Atticus, and they say, "There's always a glimmer in those who have been through the dark." And that just really rang true to me. I hope it rang true for you too. I've been in some tough times lately. But creativity always seems to be that little glimmer of light. And I hope that you find this class to be that way. And taking one more deep breath right here. Slowly exhaling it out. And then wiggling in your fingertips and wiggling in your toes. And gently blinking your eyes open. And let's get started. Let's go ahead and get started here. I have my graphite pencil in my hand, and we're just going to start the regular old-fashioned Zentangle way here by working with our dots and our corners and getting our corners to connect with just a very gentle line here. So I am just going around and creating a little bit of a frame, and you can see that my frame is quite shallow. Now I will not be inking in my frame because I'm hoping that we're going to break the frame in different places. Okay, so with that said, go ahead and do your frame, and then when we come back, we're going to actually be using a circle maker. We're going to start to build our string here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and divide the space in half. You can see I'm using my graphite pencil here, and then I'm going to go ahead and divide it in half again. Once I've got it divided here, I am going to bring in a tool. This is called a circle template, and it's made by Picket. And I love this template for doing moons. Moons are really fun to make with this particular piece, but you can do all sorts of things with this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a 3-inch circle and a 2-inch circle. All I'm going to do is take the template and line it up. And what I'm going to do is just make sure that it's all ready to rock and roll, which it is. You can see this line is all lined up and this line is all lined up. And I'm very, very lightly with my pencil going to make a circle. Once I have that, I'm going to pick up the 2.5-inch circle maker. I'm going to lay it down over the top here, and you can see that my line that I was using for lining everything up is now off center here. And you can also see here's my original division line, and you would think that this is maybe about 1/2 inch away from the arc here. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay that down, and I'm going to carve out a letter C in here so that when I pull away, I end up with a moon. Now, once I've got that moon, I'm going to go ahead and erase my string lines so that I'm able to tangle around it. So you can see that I'm going into the moon, and I'm going to clean those lines up out of there. And then also where those other lines are, we will now be able to tangle all around the moon. So it's a really lovely way to create the moon here. You go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to tangle. So now's a great time to pick up a little scratch piece of paper and bring it in to learn this wonderful tangle called Starrite. And this is by Nina Dreyer Goddard's, and I love this tangle. It is a lot of fun to play with. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by coming in and making a circle. Just a small circle. And then once we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to start to make 5 arms that kind of have a curve off of that circle. So you can see it almost looks like a man walking. And once I have that, and you'll notice these all have a slight curve to them, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just create a little topper that points outward on each of these, almost as if it was like an arrow pointing away from the center. And then once I have that, I can start to join these parts of the star together. Now, once I have that star all together, I'm going to go ahead and start to just bring in a little aura line behind, and you can connect these central lines to the outer edges if you like. And you can see that I'm trying to rejoin them to the middle. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of an arc coming in from each of those valleys, and then when we go into shading, it will make that star really fun. So let's go ahead and start to bring starrite into our piece. For those of you who have been doing all of the videos for the Itty Bitty Kitty, this is going to feel a little bit familiar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat starrite the same way that I would treat printemps or tipple or any of those things. I'm going to vary up the sizes of them. And so for me, I like to do a little bit of mapping, and I'm just going to come in here and do a couple of little circles, and you can see this one is just going to kind of float off the side of the piece. And then I'm going to go right above it and do a more medium-sized circle. I'll come over here and do a little bit of a smaller circle. And then finally, I'll come up in here and do another circle. And these two, they might be as the same size or a little bit smaller. It's okay. So what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to build in starrite into those circles. I'm going to start with this one first because I think it'll be really easy to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by bringing in a little bit of an orb in the center, and then I'm going to go ahead and start to create those arc-like shapes. And I'm doing 5 of them, and I know that this looks a lot like festoon when we first started. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and I'll break a little bit of the template here of that circle by starting in with those arrows that are going away from the center, just like so. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit more so that you can see it. Now I'm going to start to join my edges of my stars together. So you can see that I'm just using these as a guide to build my stars in. Once I have that, I'm going to move on to the next one. I'm not going to work internally. I'm just bringing in the idea of the star. So I'll jump up in here and do the same thing, just creating those nice curved lines. I'm going to do 5 of them. I'm going to start to build those little arrows that go out. And then once I've got my arrows, I'm going to let them join. I'll go to the next one, creating the arcs, creating the arrows, and then once again joining my points. And what I love about starrite is that, it can be a more organic tangle. It doesn't have to be a perfect star. She's really got this nice feeling of them floating through the piece. Now, this final one that I'm going to do at the bottom, I'm going to let part of that star float off. So you can see that part of it will flow off the page, and then the others will just stay on. So I'll just come in and let that join into the fun, and then I'll just let part of that be there. I'm going to go ahead and give that a little bit of a rejoin, and then I'll let this one float right off the side. I'll let this one come right in. Maybe I'll give that a little bit more of an arc there. Now once I've got that the way that I want it, I am going to pick up my pen and start to ink these in. So I've picked up my Micron pen here, and what this is going to look like is I'm just going to start with this one right here. And I'm going to just go ahead and ink in the center here. I've got my basic idea for this particular tangle, and all I'm going to do is just ink over what I started with. What I love about doing an overdraw is that it really helps you to learn the tangle and really solidify what you're doing with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and work with those lines that I did to create the star here. And you can see these stars are organic. They are moving. They have curves to them. They are not perfect stars. It's almost like starfish. Now once I have that in there, at the point I'm going to come down and rejoin where the circle is. So I'm just going to create a little aura that goes down towards the center. I'm going to turn the tile. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that so you can really see it. And I'm just rejoining as I go around. Now, once I have that, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to wait until I do my shading to add in any extra detail on this. The only other thing I'm going to add to it is I'm going to do a little crescent moon inside the star, and then I'm going to pool my ink so that it now has a center form. So let's go ahead and do that again, just coming in, creating those arcs going off of the center, creating that kind of starfish-like star. And then once again, I'm going to aura and rejoin that centerpiece the best way that I can. Coming back into the center once I've got it the way that I want it. And I'll go ahead and arc it off and create a little bit of that pooling in the center. So I'm going to go down and do these two. You go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to add in a new tangle into our moon. What I love about this is it looks like these stars are falling from the sky, and it's just really fun and beautiful and really easy to play with. So all I'm going to do is just take away the circles that I used to build those stars here and just let them break off. Super fun, super easy, and you've got this really nice feeling of the stars falling down. Now I do want to add the element of a shooting star in the piece, and you can see that I have my moon right here, but I've got this wonderful triangle in here in which to work in. And all I'm going to do is just build a little circle right here for my starrite, and I'm going to start by putting in that little circle, and then I'm going to put in the legs of the piece here. And I'll build that starrite just like so. Once I've got that, you know how I like to just get it all together so that I'm ready to rock and roll and bring in my pen. And then what I'm going to do is I'll bring in my pen here, start to ink it in. And it's almost as if that star is going to kiss the moon there. You see me just turn the piece. Get those to line up the best I can. And then once I have that, I am going to pick up my pencil again, and all I'm going to do is a little bit of a dot that's behind the star, and then I'm going to let the points go to that little dot, and it's going to give the illusion of a shooting star. And so I'll just come in, bringing that in. And so we have a shooting starrite, which is really, really fun, and I think it'll be really great for the piece. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to introduce a new tangle into the moon. Loving this. Hope you are too. Let's go ahead and bring in our next tangle. So our next tangle is called swisset, and it's an acronym. It's stick with it and see it through. And for all of us that have done any kind of creative endeavor, no wiser words were said, right? Anytime that you think you're doubting a piece, if you come back to that, I think those are wise words. So the way that swisset works is it is actually just like printemps, where you're going to come up and you're going to make a really nice little swirl pattern, and then you're going to bridge off of the back of it. And by the way, this tangle is by Amy Brody, who is just a wonderful tangler. And you can see that they're just kind of kissing each other as they move, right? Really, really fun tangle, and you can go all the way around, or you can do a half, or however many you want to do. This is a really, really lovely tangle. So we're going to start to bring it into our piece, and it's going to be the centerpiece for our moon. The reason why I haven't had you ink in your moon yet is because we are going to do swisset as wallpaper inside of the moon. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by bringing in light aqua. This is PC992. You can see I've loved this pencil into oblivion here. I'm really looking for a light blue color, so for those of you not playing with Prismacolor, just grab a light blue and you'll be just fine. So light aqua is such a wonderful color to start with here, and you can see that I'm pretty well sharpened up. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by rubbing the side of the pencil into the paper here. Now you'll notice that I've actually started a little bit towards the middle of the moon here. And all I'm doing is just coming in with a little bit of that circular motion, and I'm going to be working my way outward towards the points, but not into the points. So I'm just doing a really soft dusting. Let me see if I can get a little bit closer to this so that you can see it. Just getting that soft dusting of that light aqua. And it's a really nice foundation for building this tangle. Now, once I've had an opportunity to get that light aqua in there, I'm just going to give it a little bit more in any spots where I've got that background poking through here. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that yellow that we were talking about earlier. This is the Yellow Ochre. This is PC942. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dust that into my points of my crescent moon. Now you can see that I'm being mindful about these two colors. I don't want them to blend too much because I'll end up with a greenish color, but I am going to use them to just kind of give an accent to that moon. Once I've got that in there, I am going to start to build swisset into the piece. You want to make sure that your pencil is really well sharpened up. That's going to give this a really nice fine point in which to tangle. So the way that I'm going to start this tangle is I'm going to turn it on its side a little bit so that that moon is arcing this way. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start by coming up from the point, and I'm going to start to build those little arches. Now I'll come up again and build another arch and let it kind of kiss the first one, just like so. I'm going to switch my colors now and bring in a little bit of one of my favorite colors. This is the Cobalt Turquoise, or rather the Cobalt Turquoise, and this is PC105. It's a little bit of a darker blue with a little bit of a tealish touch to it, which is kind of nice. I'm going to go right back in where that starting point is, right in here, and I'm going to start to bring it up and out. Come over, I'm going to touch the edge of the moon, come down and go ahead and kiss that little arch right in here. And then I'll go ahead and give a little teardrop on the end of it. Now I'm going to continue to build up this way. So all I'm going to do is just rejoin, follow up the edge of the moon, give a nice arc, touch that other one, and then come back in and give it a little teardrop shape. So you can see where I'm going with this. I'm always going back to the point where I originated, following the moon up just a little bit, coming over and arching, touch the last one, come back in, give it a little teardrop shape. Turning the tile, going where I started from here, giving this a little bit of an arch, coming up and over, and you can see that these are getting a little bit larger, coming back in and giving it a little kiss. Now you can see that I'm getting close to where that yellow is going to join. All I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the blue, coming back up and over, and as soon as I get to where that yellow is, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pick up my other piece just for a minute, give it a little bit of an arch, come back and pick up my blue, and yours might be a little bit different, and then go ahead and create that little teardrop shape. I'm going to come back in with that yellow, come up and over, create the arch, nice teardrop shape, continuing to work my way out just like so. So that finally I end up with my tangle here of swisset. Love the way that this looks. Now, once I have this the way that I want it, I'm going to go into where I have all these little interstices. You can see that I've got these little triangles here. I'm coming in with that darker blue, and I'm going to just give it a little bit of a pooling in so that I start to define the swisset. So you can see that that's starting to give this a little bit of definition, which is really nice. And then also when I get to the yellow, I can start to pull in a little bit of that yellow that I had. And this is just going to give it a little bit of a pop. So I'm still using the yellow ochre. All I'm doing is giving it a little bit of pressure. I'm going to put in an extra swisset right there. And then when I get to the point, I will pull it in. Just like so. So go ahead and do that much, and then when we come back, we're going to do a little bit more to this tangle. You can see that I've got my moon facing upward here. On the back of each of this part of the tangle, all I'm going to do is just create a little bit of an arched line that's going to come out, and all that's going to do is create a little bit of a triangle that's going to pop off of the back of each of these curves. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick up my yellow right in here where I've got a little bit of a transition of color, and same thing in here. So all it is just a slight curve on the back of that tangle. Once I have that, inside of that triangle, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in a little bit of that darker color. And you can see that what that does is it defines the tangle in a really nice way. Now you can see up in this corner right in here, I've got more yellow, so I'm just going to give that a little bit of definition. Just like so, and then I'm going to come in over here where I have those interstices and start to bring in a little bit more of that yellow. I'll come down here, do the same thing. Giving this a little bit of a dusting, and the same thing over here. Can see I've got a little inconsistency in my paper. That's just fine. I'll deal with that when I'm going ahead and doing my shading. Same thing back in here, just giving that a little bit of an interstice so that you start to build this really beautiful tangle in here. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to do mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to shade into these beautiful swirls. I've gone ahead and picked up that light aqua again. This is that first blue that we started out with in this piece here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start in right where that little teardrop is, and I'm going to start to create a little bit of a shadow that's going to go all the way around that little swirl. And you'll start to see me hug into the piece here. I'm going to let it drop down just a little bit, and I'm starting to create a little bit of a sheen that is going to work off of the back of the piece here. So as I zoom in on this, you'll start to see it a little bit more. I can even pick up a little bit of that darker color and add a little bit more shading very, very lightly, because this is such a heavily pigmented color. We really don't need to add too much. Just picking that up and giving it a little bit of intensity, wanting to make sure that you maintain the intensity of the original tangle here. And then once I have that, you're going to see me go ahead and pick up my white. Now I will go ahead and just start right where that darkest color is meeting the light, and you can see that I'm teasing that darker blue into the lighter blue, starting to get a really nice definition there. And then I'm going to start to work my way outward, really starting to pull on that light aqua, and then I'm going to maintain that lightest blue right towards the edge, and you can see that that gives us a really beautiful shading technique. I'm going to go ahead and do it again one more time. So I'm going to pick up that lightest aqua, start to develop that shadow, and start to develop that sheen that's on the outside edge. Going to see me come in. I'll let it bounce out just a little bit. Getting right in there. And then I'll pick up that darker color very, very lightly, starting to develop a little bit of a shadow behind that curve. And then I'll come in with a little bit of that white and start to tease out that darker color into the lighter color, really developing that shadow. And then I'm going to start to work my way outward where that light aqua is, and start to pull that out and blend it out, all the while leaving a little bit of sheen right on the edge, getting this really painterly like quality inside of that tangle, which I really enjoy, and I hope that you do too. Look at how pretty that is. So you can continue to play with it and work those colors outward. And then when we come back, we're going to start to work inside of those interstices and add a little bit of interest into them. We're going to begin to bring in our guests of honor here, and this class was actually inspired by a Dire Straits song called Romeo and Juliet, and I wanted to do a play on it, so it's Romeow and Juliet. And what we're going to do for the cats today, I picked back up my graphite pencil, and I'm going to use the Tangle Flux, but I'm going to do kind of an elongated neck on Flux. And I'm just starting with this kind of teardrop shape with an elongated neck, and then I'll go ahead and I'll just put a little bit of a circle on it, and you can see that my circle is not centered. It's kind of off, almost tilting. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have my little ears moving in the direction that the head would be moving in. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a smaller little teardrop shape right next to it, still elongated at the top, and so you can see her head is a little bit lower than his, and she's going to be leaning in towards him. Now every time I do this, it's slightly different. It's fine. You don't have to worry about it being exactly the same every time. And then what we'll do is we will start to just work with the outline of the cats, and you can make them as robust or as thin as you want, because cats come in all shapes and sizes, as we know. And so I would do the same with him, and then I would fill in those negative spaces with the black ink. But you can see how I'm kind of tilting his head in towards hers and whatnot. And if you decide that you want to add like a little tail, you can, do a little tail depending on how much room you have on your piece. I did not add a tail in the original, but you can in yours. So let's go ahead and bring it into our piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the way that we just did, but we're going to use part of the body going behind our moon here. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of that teardrop shape, and I'm leaving enough space so that my star doesn't run into my cat here. So all I'm going to do is just create that teardrop shape and let it go behind. And you can see, just using my pencil here, I'm going to go ahead and put a little head on top. And it might take me a minute to get it the way that I want it. And then remember to tilt the head just a little bit so that the ears are facing like they're leaning in that direction. And then she's going to be a little bit lower than him, so I'm just going to go ahead and let her body come down. And then once again, the idea that her head is kind of tilting towards him, so it's definitely not centered on that piece there. And then once again, I'm going to take those ears and tilt them towards him. Once I've got that the way that I want it, I'm going to go in and kind of give it the love that it needs. I might make him just a little bit more robust. We'll see. I'm going to work all around the outside because it's all about the outside. So there's his head. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to bring her in. I think I'm going to make her a little bit more slender. And then I'll go ahead and just work with her ears, coming down, and just bringing this in. Now, once I have that the way that I want it, I am going to go ahead and remove any kind of pencil lines inside of the piece here. That way, I'm not going to get any kind of shine behind the ink, which is important. And then I'm going to pick up my pooling pen and start to pool my ink. Now, I'm not going to add in her whiskers until the very end of the piece because I don't want to fight with putting color over the top of her whiskers. So I will be doing that as like a finishing touch on this piece. But you can see that just getting her body in there, she's going to be really cute. And I might make her just a little bit more robust right in there. So you can see that just by bringing these two in, it just really takes the piece and gives it a little bit of grounding, which is really fun. So you've seen the way that I just worked with her, and I'm going to do the same thing with him as well. So you go ahead and put yours in, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work with the background and add just a couple of pieces in where our stars are. I want to bring a little bit of whimsy into these stars here, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of tipple inside some of the valleys of the star. And tipple is just a cluster of orbs for those of you who are new to Zentangle. And then once I have those orbs in there, I like to make my orbs effervesce, and I tend to work in threes, so I might just make 1, 2, and then maybe, let's see here comes 3 right here. And you can see these are all different sizes. And so for me, whenever I'm doing tipple, I'm always thinking about making the orbs different sizes. It just makes it more fun and just playful. So I'm going to throw around some tipple like it's confetti in here, just to give this a really nice kind of soft feeling. And then maybe I'll come down in here and add a couple. And you can see that I get these really interesting interstices when I bring it onto the stars. And what I'm doing is I'm just going in and pooling my ink into those interstices. Now, if you like to round, you can also come in and round your corners in here if that's something that you enjoy doing. I know a lot of people really like doing that rounding. So you can see that I'm just kind of playing that up a little bit. I could even come up into the corner in here and add just a couple of tipple kind of floating around in the ethos. And if you wanted to, you could even come down into this corner and do kind of a nice way of holding the corner here by throwing in some tipple. And then you can pool your ink into those places. So go ahead and play. Use tipple the way that you want to. I'm not going to put any tipple in around where they are because whiskers are going to get put in and I don't want it to be competing with that. But you can play with this as much as you like and just, have fun with it. Now, once I've had a chance to get tipple in there, and I might even break the frame over here just a little bit just to be, adventurous, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to bring in our frame. And you can see that I have to lift up and put down as I go. So I'll come over here, let it drop behind. And what I love about the frame is that it's a container for all this little chaos that we've created in here. So you can see that when I get to the star, I lift up. And because I've got all these stars over here now, I'm going to come out the other side. And so these tipple are also breaking the frame, which I really love. And then I'll turn again. And bring this through. And so you can see that just by bringing back in the frame, it holds the piece in a way that it didn't before. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work a little bit more into that background. So we're going to let go of the blues and we're going to start to bring in some of the purples. And so I'm going to be working with Daliah Purple, which is PC1009. I have violet in my hand, which is PC932, and I also have in my hand that yellow ochre, which is PC942. Now remember, if you're not working with Prismacolors, what I'm looking for is kind of a grapey little purple, a dark purple, and a really mustardy yellow. That's really what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start by bringing in just a little bit of that Daliah Purple. This is that grapey purple that I was talking about. And I'm just going to very softly bring the side of my pencil down onto the page. You can see that I'm pretty well sharpened up. And I'm just going to very lightly start to rub that pencil into the page here. And you can see that it's going to pick it up and give it a really nice feeling. I'm just getting that really soft purple, and you can see that I'm dancing around those orbs that I have there, dancing around the stars, and I'm working, pretty close to the top here. So just starting to build this in. And you can see that by working on the side of the pencil, we can really make quick business of the piece here. I'm going to let that start to drop down a little bit. And letting it come in around their faces a little bit. Now I wanted to give this kind of a ombre type of look. So once I get past their faces, I am going to switch out of the color that I'm using. I'm just going to get right in between these little stars here, and then I will stop with that purple. I'm going to go over behind the moon just a little bit and give this a little bit of that soft purple as well. Letting it dust in. You can turn the tile to make it work for your hands here. So just keeping it nice and light. So you can see that's about as much of that light purple as I'm going to use. Now I am going to pick up that yellow that we were talking about, and I'm going to let it start to dust down the backside of the moon here. And you can see that I'm letting it kind of rub into where that purple is just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little. And I'm turning the tile to make it work. Bringing it around. And then I'll let it come really close to where that little cat is, just to give this a little bit of interest. Letting it just be right in there. Now, once I have that the way that I want it, I'm going to go ahead and start to pick up a little bit of that violet that we were talking about. This is the darker purple. And I'm going to use this to build up the frame a little bit. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a perimeter shade here. And just working into the corners here. Letting it dance down into where those stars are. And you can let some of those stars have a little bit of a shadow underneath. You can see that I'm going to come over here and bring in a little bit of the shadow underneath. You could even bring it a little bit on the side. Same thing over here. Just giving that a little bit of intensity. And then if you wanted to, you could go ahead again and give it a little bit more pressure right along the black line here, just to really get this going. I'm trying to get it to really pop on the edges so that the piece is coming forward here. And you can see that I'm using a little bit of that technique of little circular motions and then coming back and pressing a little bit harder to get that edge to pop. Really defining the upper half of the piece with a little bit of intensity. So as you're looking at a sunset or anything like that, you would be looking at a darker sky up top and a lighter sky as you get closer to the horizon line. You can see that that's really starting to build quite nicely. Could even come in behind the moon and let some of that get a little bit of a shadow behind the moon. Even give that a little bit of a heavier shade. Coming in where this star is down here and giving that a little bit of a pop as well. Now once I've got it kind of the way that I want it here, I'm going to go ahead and pick back up a little bit of that Daliah Purple, and I'm going to start to just run it over the top of where we just had some of that violet. I'm just going to warm it up a little bit. You know me, I do love to layer colors, and I find that it really does give this an interesting feel when you start to layer the purples over each other. So you can see that I'm just getting in there and starting to layer. And as I get, further away from the edge, you can see that I'm kind of lightening up my touch a little bit so that it fades out in a nice way. Same thing down in here, just giving it a little bit of a blurring out where that darker purple is meeting the lighter purple, and then you can lighten up your touch as you move away. And you can see I'm not worried about where that yellow is, I'm just letting it be. Same thing over here if you wanted to soften this up a little bit. And just let that kind of get nice and soft. Now, once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and start to pick up my white pencil, making sure that there's no other colors on it. And as I start to go, I'm going to start to just blend in the sky really nice and softly. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that pencil. I'm really just keeping it nice and soft. So we're just layering our colors and then starting to blend them into each other. So I'm going to go all the way through and start to give this a little bit of a blend. You go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work with our stars and our tipple just a little bit. So have some fun with this. I really enjoy watching these colors kind of blur into each other and get quite electric. It's really one of my favorite things about working with color, and I hope you enjoy it too. So have fun. One of the things that I love about working with the white pencil is that it lets you have the opportunity to do a little bit more work. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm just going to come into this area with the violet. This is that darker purple. And I'm just going to add a little bit of drama around the inside of where my moon is. You can see that I'm going nice and light with that purple. I don't have to go heavy. And I'm just going to really hug the inside edge of where that purple is. Just giving this a little bit more intensity and defining that space a little bit more with the purple. Or with the violet. And you can see that that's started to give that moon a little bit more definition. And just letting that kind of drop down a little bit. And if you wanted to, you could pick up a little bit of the Daliah Purple and start to let those two intermingle. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of graphite and start to work with the other side of the moon here. And what that's going to do is it's going to give it a little bit of definition. So I've got my graphite pencil here, and I'm just going to give a little bit of graphite in where the yellow is. I'm trying to get kind of a little bit of a spooky feel with that graphite. I'm going to let it hug the edge of the moon here. Once again, defining the shape of the moon a little bit. Now you could take your finger and just give this a little bit of a blur just to soften it up. You could also use your blending stump if you wanted to. I'm actually going to pick up a little bit of the yellow and start to push that graphite around just a little bit and give a little bit of definition. And just give that a little bit of a push right in there. And you can see that that's already starting to define the moon a little bit more, which is kind of nice. And you can play it up as much or as little as you want. You could even take a little bit of your white pencil, making sure that you don't have any purple left on it, and just give it a little bit of a blur out that way. And you can see how that takes that graphite and it moves it around. So there's lots of different ways to work with graphite. And the other thing that I love about this is that you're sealing the graphite so that it's not going to rub off and cause a mess on other places, which I really like the way that this looks. The other thing that you can do is you can come in with a little bit of that yellow once again, and in certain places where you have the lightness of color, you can come in with a little bit of that yellow and just start to make this look like a watercolor. Like you can see in here, I've got a little bit of lightness in here, and it just takes a little bit of that tonality and brings it throughout the piece. Like up in this corner, I could add just a little bit of yellow right over the purple, and it's just going to give it a little bit of interest into that background. You can see I'm going to come over in here because I have a little bit of lightness in there. And then if you want to, you can pick up that white again and start to blur in those places and soften it up. So you can do this as much or as little as you like. It's really up to you how you want to play with color. And I'm going to continue to do this just for a little bit, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work with our stars. So let's work with these background stars here. And in my original piece, one of the things that I did was I interspersed the gray with the yellow and made the stars different colors. And so that's what we're going to talk about right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide which colors are going to be, or which stars are going to be yellow and which stars are going to be gray. So I'm going to do these two yellow in here, and the rest of them will be gray back in here. Now to shade this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just creating a little line that comes out from each of these little valleys or indentations in the star, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of interest there. And then once I have that, I'm going to shade on one side of that line, and I'm usually going to do it on the right side. So all I'm doing is just coming in and giving this a little bit of a shadow, turning the tile and going to the right side of the star here and just giving it a little bit of a shadow. So as I move through, you'll see how this just really takes that star that was very, very flat and gives it a really nice dimension. Super fun, super playful. So go ahead and do your yellow stars, and then when we come back, we'll do our gray stars. Once I've had a chance to work with the yellow, I'm going to come in and start to work with my graphite pencil. And you can see that I'm just going to start this the same way that I did on the other one. And I'm going to go ahead and start to give a little bit of that silver on the right hand side here. So you're going to see that I'm just working that way. Once I've had a chance to go all the way around the star on the right hand side, you're going to see me pick up my blending stump, and I'm going to just give it a little bit of love with that blending stump and just really start to watch a little bit of dimension work its way through the star. You know, I love to wait until the very end to work with graphite just because it's a little bit messy to work with, and I just don't like to wear it. So I'm waiting until the very end to work with these. But you can see how it plays off of the yellow so nicely. So as I zoom out, you can see the difference in the stars. So I'm going to go ahead and do these last couple of stars, and then we're going to talk about Tipple and our border and whiskers. Now, if you're like me and you like to seal your graphite, I've picked up my white pencil here, and I'm just going to come in and start to seal my graphite with a little bit of that white so that it doesn't move as I'm starting to work around the piece. So if you want to go ahead and seal yours in, you can. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pick back up the blues here, and you guys have often heard me talk about carrying color. I'm going to take some of this blue and I'm going to sprinkle it around the piece by coming in and shading Tipple. And Tipple are those little orbs, and all I'm going to do is just go halfway through Tipple with that light blue, and then I'm going to grab the dark blue and give it a little bit of a push right on the edge here. And then I'll pick up a little bit of my white and I'll start to blur from the front where it's nice and light into the back and give that a really neat feel. So go ahead and work on your Tipple all the way throughout, and you'll start to see how that brings a little bit of congruency into the piece. So I'm going to come back in with my Micron pen here, and I'm going to go ahead and just give a couple of whiskers in here for the boy cat, or for Romeow. And so all I'm going to do is just give it a little bit of movement up towards the moon, just like so. And then for the girl cat, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have hers moving downward as if her head was tilted, and then the same thing going up. And you can see there is kind of a little wiggle and wobble in my line. It kind of gives it a little bit more of a Halloween-esque kind of feel to it. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of my gray and give it just a little bit of a shadow right inside the under half of where I have the moon, or rather the star, the shooting star. So I've got a little bit of that graphite pencil in here, and I'm just giving a little touch of a shadow. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of that yellow and start to blur it out just a little bit, and I'll leave a little bit of lightness towards the moon here just to keep it interesting, so that it gives it a little bit of that feeling of movement and also gives it a little bit of contrast next to the moon. Now, if you want to add a little bit of highlighting into your piece, you can always come in with your little white gel pen. I happen to have the Jelly Roll 10 in my hand here, and you can go ahead and just add in a little bit of light inside of where your Tipple are, and you can see that that just makes it that much more juicy and interesting. And for the smaller ones, I tend to do dots instead of lines, just so that I can get a little something in there. So go ahead and play, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about finishing touches. You can see that I brought in my original piece, and what I'm going to talk about right now is the moon here. In my original piece, I put in some orbs, and in this one I think I'm going to do it with dots, and you can see that I have my white pen in my hand again, and I'm just going into where those interstices are and just adding in some dots in the darkest parts of where that ink is. And you can see I'm even dropping some into where the yellow is. I'll come down and add some dots in here, and I just think that it just gives that moon a little bit more of a festive feel. And I also feel like it just gives it a little bit more pop than the orbs did before. I felt like the orbs were competing with the Tipple that I had there. Now, also in the original one, I did do a black border, so you can see that I filled in that area with black, and in this one I'm leaving it light. I always like to change it up and show you guys what it looks like if you just keep a light border and try something different. I've always, felt like every time I come back to a piece, I'm not the same person that I was when I created the first one, and so I always handle it a little bit differently as I go through. I'm going to come in and just put my chop in my piece, and your chop is just your initial, and it's just your way of saying that you have completed your piece. It's also a really great time to offer gratitude for the opportunity to create today. You know, using creative time is a really great way of doing self-care, and I hope that you feel like today was a great day to do some self-care. If you enjoyed the class, please give the class a thumbs up. Even better, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified every time I add a video to our channel here on YouTube. And even best, share the class with a friend. It's always nice to tangle with a friend. It's a great way to build community and have some fun with somebody that you love. I'd love to see your creations over on our Tangled Yogi Art community page on Facebook. Everybody goes over there and shares their work after they've done the videos, and it's so neat to see how differently everybody creates the piece. So that's it for me. I'm Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to tangling with you soon.